So yeah, let's start with the meadow.
Let's go.
Cool. So this is the meadow. This is like the very first level, and it's probably the simplest one as well. The idea is like I said earlier, find your friends within the crowd of identical people and punch them. Whilst you do that, some of the robots are going to reveal themselves, so there's going to be less and less NPCs, so it should be easier in theory. So yeah, let me quickly start it. Yeah, Billy, how did you plan on doing music for this? Because it's in terms of visuals, this is it. It's very sort of green, outdoorsy. Did you try and take that theme we talked about earlier and pass it over into the music?
Yeah, there's a few pockets of it quietly, but I have to say this one I went more with just kind of, I think the fact that they chose a meadow as the first level felt very kind of Mario video game tropey. So I was almost thinking this was a bit like a Mario piece, albeit through the lens of Unspottable. So it's mostly, it doesn't have much of the theme in, but I can point it out when it gets to it in a second. You'll hear a little snippet of it.
Let's have a listen.
But yep. There you go. So it's only really in passing in this one, but in terms of like instrumentation, this was a mixture of just kind of string picks, my housemate playing some guitar in it, and kind of electric pianos for the slightly zany, quirky, there are some robots in a meadow feeling of like something a bit alien has landed here. So, I mean, that's the main compositional building block.
That's quite interesting. That's quite subtle. I like that. Well, most of this, in terms of the samples, I suppose you could say that you used. Yeah, you. So for this and some other tracks, you recorded your friend playing guitar. Was there any other live instruments, or was it mostly sampled?
Almost entirely sampled, but the exceptions were the little kind of singing robot bits, which were me singing, the acoustic guitar, and then in other live instruments. Oh, actually, all of them feature a little bit of me doing some snapping and clapping. So, like, from the main theme, I thought it'd be fun just to like use the snaps and claps subtly within the percussion of each like individual piece. So they've all got a bit of that too. But most of the live instruments are quite like quirky soloist style stuff, like the guitar or that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay.
But
We'll probably hear this more with some other tracks. Was there any like sample libraries you used to produce the music at all?
Yep. The two I used the most throughout it was for the string arrangements, Spitfire chamber strings, and then it has minimal woodwinds, but what I did use an awful lot of was bass clarinet, which again was the Spitfire symphonic woodwinds. Bass clarinet, just the staccatos as a kind of quirky soloist. So one led together a kind of saxophone-like sound, which was quite useful in some of the tracks. But also as a soloist on its own, it was quite effective at just having a kind of cheeky or sneaky sound to it, like playing in the low registers. So
nice.
Yeah, I could be more specific with different tracks, but this one was mostly chamber strings and electric piano and the guitar. So yeah,
we'll go into more with some other tracks as well. Some of the sounds I had to do for this were like the bleeping sounds that we probably heard as the robots were sort of dropping like flies. For that, there's little battery signs above their heads that say that they're about to die, which one's about to die. So that made me think of a mobile phone. So all I did is basically I think what I did originally is tried recording my phone just vibrating on the table, but it didn't sound very good. It sounded a bit messy, and you don't get much frequencies, it turns out, from that. So I think I just tried to replicate it with some with a software synthesizer, so just some square waves or something, just filters, so you just get a like that, or maybe even sawtooth to get that kind of fuzzy feel. And then there's just a light little bleeping on top of that, so blum blum. Again, not much real recordings there. The cows, I kind of wish I'd redone. So when they asked me for this, we had like a week, I don't know if you remember, Billy, to give them something back. Where I am now, I'm in Cornwall, so there's plenty of cows around. I wanted to go around and actually record get up close to a cow and just record it, but I couldn't. So I had this recording of just some distant ambiences, and it had some cows in, so you can kind of hear them in the background. And I think they said they were happy with it, so that's fine. But in an ideal world, I would have got some better recordings. But that's something I learned really with this project. The time is against you, and sometimes you're not going to get the results you want. Really, sometimes you've just got to make do with what you've got.
I think there's also the consideration that the cows are kind of in the background of the scene anyway. So to me, it's always felt acceptable. I didn't even know that. So classic thing of compromising the right place, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, true. It's not like a critical part of it. That's, I guess, something that bothered me as someone who's working on it and made it. I wanted everything to be perfect. And then ambience-wise, there's some of the levels have just a 30-second loopy ambience. This one does, not all of them do. And what I like to do in my ambience is, so it's a field, for example, so I could have just gone out and recorded a field. I kind of like to mash up a few recordings of fields and nature and stuff. So I've got some files on my computer of ambiences. Some have birds in them, some have crickets in them more than others, some have the sounds of leaves rustling, and some have just gentle wind. And so I'll combine all these together, and I'll take the snippets I like to create a new ambience, I suppose you could say, that has a bit more detail and a bit more going on in it. It sounds a bit more interesting. So you're taking all these raw recordings of places that you've recorded and combining the best elements just simply by layering them, cutting anything out you don't want. Is there anything you want to talk about music wise? Like we said, this is a pretty simple one for you, isn't it?
No, I think I've covered everything. But actually the only addition that I have remembered since we were talking is within the kind of percussion of each track, in addition to the snaps and claps, there is usually a gyro, which I've used the same one pretty consistently across them. So that was just kind of one trick of having the snaps, claps, and gyro as a genre agnostic thing that could fit into each piece. Now that I'm hearing the music back, I remember that.
What's that? Sorry, a gyro?
Gyro, yeah. So it's a little thing you hear occasionally, and kind of clicky sounding percussion. Yeah,
I can kind of hear it now that you've pointed that out to me.
Yeah. It works in a surprising amount of the tracks where it shouldn't technically work, but fits fine. So, it's a way of linking them all together, essentially. Yeah.
Very nice. Cool. Then the last thing I'll demonstrate, what I'm going to do is just, I'm going to win the game, basically, and we'll just hear a few more sounds and a few more music pieces. There's a short thing you'll all hear in a second.
That's the end of the level. Hey, wow. Cool. Nice sounds, by the way.
Thank you. Oh, cool. I thought that was going to automatically change, but it hasn't. Okay, cool. So we can talk about this. So as you can see, this is the kind of scene that sits in between all the levels. So once someone's won and they've collected their points, it tallies it up here. So we just had to quickly cut the cameras out because that was causing audio issues. Billy, you were telling us about the music for this level. You were saying how it's a bit more competitive, is that right?
Yeah, I think the main word I went for was competitive because it's the same piece of music that plays regardless of if the player wins or loses. So it needs to be a piece that would just kind of summarise this is the space between levels. So competitive was kind of what I went for. Additionally, because it was the factory stage, I used a little drum machine with a high pass and low pass running up and down in the background, which I think helped to give a kind of filtered sound, almost like the players being sucked in and out of that pipe was what I was thinking of. So yeah, that's a rough overview. You'll hear similar percussion to some of the other pieces in that you'll hear a bit of the gyro and also claps and snaps in this too. But yeah.
Speaking of those pipes, that was quite a fun one to do sound-wise because hopefully I'll be able to show this off later. There is an instance in this game where if you lose a point, the players get sucked back up into those pipes, and that made me immediately think of a vacuum cleaner. So I think that's what I did. I just started recording my Hoover and stuff, and just or hair dryers, anything that went like that, and just stuck it in. And did some more of those, like I was saying earlier, pops with bottles and stuff. And but other than that, not much to really say in terms of sound. Pretty simple stuff. So yeah, let's move on.